Hello everyone, thank you for coming to our webinar building a highly available Hyper-V cluster using free Microsoft Hyper-V server. That is presented to you by StarWind Software and SNINE Software. Our presenters for today are Max Kolomazov, StarWind Virtual SAN Product Manager, and me, Alex Karamanov. Let's go over the agenda for today. And our agenda contains data about our cluster. How do we actually configure and set up our cluster? Clustering evolution. What exactly free Hyper-V offers out of the box. Storage and management components. And implementation scenarios. Please use questions panel to ask any questions that you may have during the webinar, and we'll run a dedicated Q&A session in the very end. So now I'm passing my word to Max to say a few words about StarWind software.
Right. Thank you, Alex. So StarWind software specializes on software-defined storage. We've been out in the market since 2003 as a product within Rocket Division Software, and then we spinned off in 2008, forming a completely separate company, which now is storage only. Guys from VM and LMS Capital and A Ventures helped us doing this, and we're now focused on developing just one product, which is StarWind Virtual SAN, Storage Virtualization Suite. We've got more than 250,000 paying and playing customers worldwide, and we are quartered out of Boston, Massachusetts, which is really close to Five9 headquarters. And Alex, how's it in Boston? Tell us about Five9 software.
Yeah, thank you, Max. Let me just go over to Five9 software slide. And we are actually a leading solution provider of management and security application for Windows Server and Microsoft Hyper-V. The reason we actually are capable of doing that, our products are exclusively concentrated for Hyper-V ecosystem, and they include management for Hyper-V, usually by used SMB customers, powerful agentless and multi-tenant security for Hyper-V, and easy conversion from VMware to Hyper-V, Five9 B2B Easy Converter. We are headquartered in Boston, Massachusetts, with offices in New Jersey and Europe, and we have more than 25,000 clients worldwide. As of now, let's probably remind ourselves what clustering looked like in old ways. So Max, what do you remember about that?
I do definitely remember some nightmares about old clustering, like no virtualization. We didn't know that world yet. We just had to play with something like virtualization server. What was it called back in 2003 or 2004? We got separate cluster for each individual application. Had to provision separate storage for each of those clusters, like had to spend a lot of money on all those servers. And I often encountered situations where applications we needed to make reliable were not even cluster aware. So it was a challenging job those days. It's like early space exploration. It was quite challenging. Right now we have everything much more comfortable. We got virtualization everywhere, even in our laptops. And in our data centers, we just have, I don't know, 5-6 servers running all the virtual machines, all the applications which would previously take an entire 100-server data center to run. We've got our storage converged or hyper-converged. We've got our budgets spent not for lots of servers but for the services and for real uptime to provide those services. And our applications are now so flexible that we don't even need to think about do we want them clustered or not. They're actually one step ahead of us right now. So it's a good thing, and I think a lot of that appeared because some vendors allowed virtualization for free. So it was a lofty goal for some time, but definitely giving it out for free for enthusiasts made its job of spreading the word of mouth and spreading the idea across the globe, like Zen or, for instance, free Hyper-V. Free Hyper-V is a really interesting example for that.
And that's absolutely right, yeah. So Hyper-V really does the job, but really, I assume audience is very curious about what does free Hyper-V offer out of the box.
Well, free Hyper-V offers free Hyper-V out of the box. It does offer you Hyper-V role clustering feature, and that's essentially it. It's a stripped-down version of the operating system with no graphic user interface, so the command line only, and you have to maintain some good command line skills to get it up and running and configure your cluster properly. And still, to get it clustered, you may want some shared storage, and then to manage it properly, you still need some additional skills. So you would really like some experience enhancers there. And I know that some guys came out with solutions to help out, right?
Absolutely, right. And yeah, this is actually where we are right now. So right, within StarWind, you actually get rid of shared storage necessity, right? So you don't really have to go and buy an extra one. You can use the existing service to do that, and you just need 2 servers to do that, right? And with 5.9 Manager, you actually get fantastic efficient way of managing your Hyper-V clusters. So even if you don't have any GUI interface, you're still able to perform management tasks with convenient management interface. So you don't really have to spend your time on the learning curve for learning PowerShell. So you can really do that from a convenient GUI. So this is what you can do with File Manager of Hyper-V, and as far as we know what we need for that, of course, the best practice would be use experience enhancements. Let's say a few words about what you need to actually set up a Hyper-V cluster. So to do that, the very first step, you actually really need a shared storage. Obviously, virtual machine is stored there, and you need to make sure that it is configured and provisioned correctly. Then you install failover clustering feature on each Hyper-V host, and that is absolute necessity because keep in mind, if you want to have cluster, you really need to have that role present on each of your Hyper-V hosts. Then you need to make sure that MPIO feature is installed, configure external virtual network switch, validate configuration of Hyper-V hosts, and voila, you create a new cluster. So as you notice, the very first step is to configure and provision shared storage. So this is where I want to pass my word to Max to speak about storage component.
Right, thank you, Alex. Indeed, in order to cluster something, you have to configure shared storage. So there is no way to configure a shared nothing cluster for solid uptime and real resilience, which would tolerate failures or unplanned downtime. So idea with StarWind Virtual SAN is to get rid of traditional SANs as a dedicated storage layer and converge that layer into the hypervisor layer. So as you can see from the diagram, hypervisor and StarWind Virtual SAN are running on the same hardware. They're running on the same layer, so StarWind acts as a Windows layer application. And it takes local storage, mirrors it using standard Ethernet, and thereby we get a lot of benefits. So first of all, we zero our hardware footprint. We don't have any additional servers. You just have your virtualization layer and that's it. Thereby, we dramatically reduce our capital expenditure and of course the operating expenditure, because no proprietary layer to buy, no proprietary layer to run. That's excellent. And on top of that, while a lot of companies need at least 3 servers to do a similar thing, StarWind managed to create an ecosystem which is self-sufficient and fully fault-tolerant with just 2 servers. This system is relying on heartbeat interfaces between the servers and keeps your data fault-tolerant. So should one node fail or one data store fail, your virtual machines are still available from the copy which is available on the partner. Now, everything here is Windows, and StarWind is a Windows application as well. So it's as simple as a set of wizards you go through to configure your storage. So it takes really half an hour to configure the entire clusters. It's really easy to use. You don't need any specialized stuff for management. You don't need to go to any trainings or certifications to do that. You can configure it in your lab, play around with it, then install it in your production environment, verify it, or actually use the verification service by StarWind, which comes with the purchase, and go into production. And one more neat feature is that it can run on any Windows version. So Windows Server, Windows Server Core, or even the free Hyper-V server we're covering during our today's event. Now, why hyper-converged? As I said, we're a native Windows application, so we can really afford that. We do not get the overhead of a virtual machine like VSAs, so we sit right next to the Windows core. We can get as powerful as we want, and we are not limited with our resources. And also, we get really high performance since we're dramatically reducing I/O path. So from the virtual machine, you're not going down to hypervisor, then networking, then eventually you end up hitting storage. No, you just go to the hypervisor layer, and then you go directly into the memory on this machine, where we have caching, and then we have a flash cache layer, and then we have local spindles. So you don't go through the network at all. That gives you excellent latency, and that gives you excellent resilience, your configuration. Now, our solution is developed with virtual machine workload in mind. We use a combination of RAM and flash to absorb random I/O and thereby offload that of magnetic disks. And then the so-called I/O blender, which comes from the virtualized environment, like a lot of small random reads and writes, are packed into big sequential writes, and this allows us to achieve not the IOPS characteristics of the storage, but the throughput characteristics of the storage. So let's say if your array can do 1,000 IOPS, but if you look at the sequential speed is much, much better. So with LSFS, we'll be looking at sequential speed, and appropriate IOPS amount will be much, much faster than old school storage. And of course, this has additional features. So it's not only VM-centric, it's cutting-edge technology with inline deduplication, since we'd like to get our storage to be as fast as it can, and deduplication can help us with that, not only by saving space, but by reducing the number of writes to the underlying storage. So we do in-memory dedupe, which saves flash and prevents flash from burning out too quick. And that's just 2 basic features. Of course, on top of that, StarWind facilitates snapshot technology. We're doing one called internode tiering, where we offload our cold data from the primary system off to the secondary with high-capacity drives. And if we need that snapshot reverted, we can easily transfer it over the network. That's not a bottleneck anymore. It's 21st century. Then, of course, asynchronous replication. That's a feature which our customers wanted the most, and I totally understand that they want to have a 360 protection from one solution. They don't want to have multiple vendors to go to for different features. If you have storage, then you'd like to have everything storage related be developed by one vendor. StarWind facilitates DR replication, which is deduplication aware, is snapshot based, and really saves the load on slow WAN connections. So it's made with slow links in mind. And Alex, I guess it's a good time to figure out how to manage Hyper-V more effectively.
Yeah, thank you, Max.
Tell us some interesting techniques.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So this is what we are planning to cover today. So we really briefly touch that. As you got the point, so File Manager actually allows you to turn PowerShell into GUI, and that really helps you to do that really much faster instead of learning PowerShell once again. So you can do that within a convenient GUI interface. So you obviously dramatically simplify and save your time and therefore money on Hyper-V management. And with File Manager, you are able to manage your Hyper-V clusters. Of course, this is our topic, so yes, you can do that within File Manager. It also provides you with convenient GUI, right? And it allows you to manage your Hyper-V hosts even from a system that is not domain joined. So you can even bring your laptop in, connect it to your network, and configure your Hyper-V host and virtual machine. So that domain independency really helps, and it can run even on Windows 7 machine that is 64-bit to manage any version of Hyper-V starting from 2008 R2SP1 to 2012 R2. Obviously, clustering is going to be a really big point for most of you guys. So when you get a cluster within infrastructure, you need to find a convenient way to manage that. So if it's based on free Hyper-V, you really need to be able to see that and do all the management within the same console. So File Manager allows to do that, so you can just add it to the console, check available storage that you just previously configured with StarWind Virtual SAN, and make sure that it is there, and you can clearly see that storage configured successfully and correctly, and you can see all the available space there. Then you would add a remove virtual machine to a cluster, so make it high available or just a standalone one. Great functionality that you get with a real cluster is a real live migration. So when you have it, you can freely move virtual machines around, and actually some great features like dynamic optimization are also common this way. So once you have a cluster with shared storage, you're able to freely move virtual machines around and make sure that load is optimal on each of your cluster nodes. Performance and maintenance tasks with File Manager also becomes very simple. So what you do, you just put one of your nodes into maintenance mode, and with or without running roles, and you can easily resume it afterwards after you've done all of your cluster maintenance. So you get all of that, and that's really important to have within your Hyper-V infrastructure. So if we move forward to next functionality is going to be creating new virtual machines out of templates. Obviously, once you set up a cluster, you want to create new virtual machines pretty fast, because you know that you can evenly spread the load between your cluster nodes, and once there is a business need for a new virtual machine, you have to be able to do that fast. So creating a golden image template virtual machine is going to help you with that. You know, that is actually a pretty straightforward process, and I'm absolutely sure that most of you are familiar with that. But let me just go over that one more time so it gets very clear. So you just create a new virtual machine with needed parameters. You install and configure your operating system and required software. Then you run sysprep to clear all the data that can't be within cloud virtual machine, and you keep it off. So whenever you need to spin up new virtual machine, you just click on that, you select cloning functionality within File Manager for Hyper-V. You set up as many clones as you need within specify how many clones you want to create window, and that's it. So File Manager does the job for you, and you get new healthy virtual machines running just in few minutes after you initiated this operation. So clusters, as you know, they actually have multiple virtual machines. They have high availability, but of course there is also kind of maintenance that you perform. There are multiple tasks, multiple changes that you would do, create clones, export virtual machines, and so on. So monitoring and tracking all of that may be pretty difficult unless you get to task log within File Manager. So task log actually allows you to see all operations that you perform within File Manager and within your Hyper-V cluster, and make sure that all of them accomplished successfully. If not, you can see details about that and check out what is the exception there, what is causing the failure. And this really helps you to monitor all of that and saves you time, because instead of waiting until operation finishes, you can just put it into background, so transfer it to task log and monitor it there whenever you need that. So really, instead of spending time on viewing that, you can keep managing all you need. With the cluster and virtual machines running your business on, obviously you really want to have more than just a real-time view within the window, but also you want to be notified in case something goes not the way you expected. So that's why we also built in notifications within File Manager, and they allow you to actually see and receive notification email if someone creates, removes, starts or restarts a virtual machine, turns it off, imports or exports. So running the business with some kind of sensitive data within the infrastructure may be especially important to know if someone is trying to import or export a virtual machine. So this is what File Manager allows you to do. Also, you'll get notification whenever a replication fails or configuration of a virtual machine changes, because obviously this is something that brings you great knowledge about your current Hyper-V system. So you just had a cluster, you know how to be notified about your virtual machines. So obviously now you know what you need to do to set up high available Hyper-V cluster with shared storage and management capabilities. So Max, what would be an area to use it in real life?
In real life, so I think that with that kind of setup where we just cut the cost on dedicated SAN infrastructure and we cut the cost on GUI's licensing, we got a really neat solution for SMBs. Well, not all the SMBs are just about I'll have a one server running my applications and I'll just have backups of it. No, it's not like that anymore. Customers are getting spoiled by the service, so you need to keep the mark. You need to be highly available, and having a really good entry point to that enterprise feature level is a good thing to do. So just implement 2 servers and get fully redundant, highly available cluster, which is easy to manage. That's a dream for any SMB. Well, there are usually no people who are dedicated to this job on a full-time basis. So it's good to know that your IT can run itself, and if something happens, it's not big of a deal to fix it or to reprovision something. And with StarWind and 5.9, that's indeed the case. And what about bigger scenarios for it? What do you think about it, Alex?
Yeah, indeed. There is definitely a space for that for bigger companies. Because obviously, whenever you're big and you have your central site, the central data center, you tend to create branch offices, remote offices, and these ones are actually running a really strict amount of hardware. you really don't need to have this extra expenditures. You just try to make sure that your business is running safely, but still the number of hardware units you use actually is minimum. That allows to actually cut costs down, and this scenario is actually also called a ROBOS scenario, right? Remote office, branch office, and having capabilities of running highly available Hyper-V clusters within these offices is certainly a great setup.
Indeed, indeed. And I think we prepared some calculations for going hyper-converged in ROBOS. So here's the idea. We had the original configuration for our remote office, which is 2 servers, a SAN, and operating system license. Well, usually it's just either 2 servers or 1 server, because doing a cluster in a robo environment often involved the SAN, well, actually always involved the SAN, and that resulted in significant cost increase. And we just got past that limit. So we add StarWind and 5.9 to our initial setup. Effectively get rid of a SAN as a dedicated storage layer, get rid of the OS licensing, at least the base license for the 2 servers. And we have saved at least $7,000. And with Robo, we're talking at least 10 locations to implement that configuration, which is at least $70,000 for the IT budget, and that's $70,000 capital expenditure, and there will be a lot of more savings on the operating expenditure on that. And imagine what would be if we implement that in 100 locations.
Yeah, let me just calculate that. That actually is going to be 0.7 million in savings for 100 locations. And that's actually
right.
That's a huge number. That's a huge number.
That is a 0.7 million in capital expenditure savings. And that is going to be at least $200,000 of operating expenditure savings on the ongoing basis. So with that, would like to thank everyone for attending to our today's event. I hope it was interesting for you, and we'd like to announce that this was just the first part. We'll also have a sequel for this event, which will be much more tech-oriented, where we'll do a few slides and entirely focus on a breakout of a 2-node hyper-converged scenario running on StarWind and managed by 5.9 software. And right now, we're going to have a Q&A session, and you're welcome to enter your questions into questions and answers panel on the GoToMeeting. Okay, and we've got our first question here. Norman asks us, if I already have shared storage for my cluster via SAN, is it difficult to add StarWinds and move my cluster to it? I would say that it is not difficult at all. In this case, you configure StarWind with your local storage, then do a storage migration of the virtual machines from the dedicated SAN to the StarWind SAN, and then repurpose your old SAN. Yeah, repurposing the old SAN would be the most difficult part, I guess. But in terms of moving everything to StarWind, not at all. I think we're good. And
okay, so yeah, let's actually give some more time for people to type questions in. That definitely, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. We've got the second question coming in.
Okay.
Kate asks us, how many NICs are needed in each Hyper-V server? How many NICs? I guess it's a storage-related question. So Alex may need just one NIC to manage the cluster, or even manage the cluster directly. I know 5.9 runs on core version, and it actually has a GUI inside the core version. So these guys do some magic. And in terms of StarWind, StarWind needs at least 3 NICs between the servers. So 2 NICs for iSCSI and synchronization, and 1 NIC which may be shared with some other tasks which is used for heartbeat. So count it as 2 NICs plus 1 VLAN for some StarWind traffic. Then Steven Ivanovsky asks us, is virtual SAN an active-active setup, or is it more like a master-slave? Now, it is a true active-active setup, or we can also do a more complex thing like active-active slave, where we have an offsite replica which asynchronously gets data offsite. Then, a question from John. John asks us, what about using free Hyper-V manager in conjunction with my 2012 R2 existing cluster?
So if you, I would assume
Alex,
that's related to me. So if you say about free finance manager for Hyper-V, so it can actually work on your existing cluster if you manage your cluster nodes locally, one by one. But to get full-featured cluster support, you actually need to go with full finance manager to do that. If you talk about Microsoft Hyper-V Manager, as you know, it doesn't include cluster capabilities in there, so there is no way to do that. We also have a question from Mr. Hum. So how important is a UPC, UPS actually, for power because of the use memory as a cache? So I would assume, yeah, this is a question related to you, Max.
Okay, yeah, so UPS is, I would say, semi-important. So our best practice is to use UPS for at least one node of the cluster, so the data is not lost when both nodes go down, or if both nodes go down. So StarWind distributes write cache between multiple servers, and the cache is always kept coherent. So if one node fails, the cache is not lost. It is immediately flushed to the disk on the second node. But in order to fulfill the requirements of a complete downtime, or let's say a power outage, at least one UPS should be present in configuration. Okay, and we've got one more question from Keith. How does 5.9 differ from Microsoft System Center Virtual Machine Manager? That's an interesting one, Alex.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. So indeed, if you compare these two products, actually, they may look really alike for your everyday Hyper-V management tasks. So price-wise comparison is actually around probably 20 times difference. As a functionality, we actually aim to deliver 90–95% of everyday life tasks that you would need within Finance Manager of Hyper-V. So with the upcoming version of Finance Manager, we are also including dynamic optimization capabilities, so you can dynamically optimize the load between your Hyper-V cluster nodes. And there are just going to be a couple more differences between the System Center and Finance Manager. So full multi-tenancy support is obviously available only in System Center, and it can also provision multiple templates for you. So you learn that you can actually do pretty much the same as creating a golden image and cloning that with Finance Manager. So if you have a question about what product you need to use, I'll be more than happy to get on a call with you so we can evaluate your environment and actually see what is the best fit. But I can tell you, Finance Manager covers 90–95% of our customers very well. So I think we have a new question from Jan, right? And this is about Virtual SAN. So does the Virtual SAN and software work properly with Steam NICs on the hosts?
Okay, so Virtual SAN does own teaming, first of all, and then if there is an operating system teaming, there may be some issues. So iSCSI and O-block traffic does not really like teaming. Instead, it likes multipathing better. So even with 2012 R2, where Microsoft announced we do support teaming for iSCSI, there are still some glitches where I would basically say for now it's still better to use StarWind's internal teaming for iSCSI tasks and then use Microsoft teaming for Microsoft tasks. So you're free to use teaming on the Hyper-V networks, on the live migration networks, but for everything StarWind related, just leave it to StarWind and it will do it according to its internal best practices. And let's see if we have any more questions. Not sure. Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess we answered most of the questions so far. Please note that we have our email addresses on the screen right now. And should you have any additional questions, feel free to contact us, and our engineers will definitely help you with your work inquiries. With that, we'd like to thank you for attending our today's event. We hope it was interesting for you. Stay tuned for the invitation to the sequel, where we'll be doing a techie part of the Hyper-V config. And have a good day.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Enjoy your day. Goodbye.